I'm Matthew Previte. I'm a CPA here in Massachusetts. Since 1990, my firm has represented taxpayers before the IRS, the Mass Department of Revenue, and other state tax agencies. We are a small tax resolution firm that offers very personal service. Oftentimes when clients come to us, we need to figure out where their case is within the collection system, because it makes a big difference as to where you are in the system as to what we need to do and how we need to approach the case. For instance, some of our clients come to us before a tax has ever been assessed. Let's say they haven't filed in 10 years and the IRS has never sent them a notice and they want to deal with the problem. Those cases, it's a lot easier because they haven't been caught yet. Then we have clients who they've been caught, taxes have been assessed, now they're at the end of the collection cycle and they actually have a court date with the U.S. District Court federal judge. That's the other extreme. And then we have everything in between. So, generally where your case is going to determine to some extent how your problem is resolved. The first phase of the 3 stages of collection is the campus. And we're talking about the IRS here first. Once you file a return, and the tax return gets processed, you will get a notice, a balance due notice from the IRS. And so from these campuses where returns are processed, you will get 4 notices. And it's basically a CP 501, 2, 3, or a CP 504. Those 4 notices are in stage 1, which is the campus. During that time, essentially there is no collection activity, but the letters increasingly get more threatening. And ultimately in the 4th one talk about potentially levying your assets. During that time, it's easy enough to call the IRS and get holds on collection, which will stretch out those 4 notices over that 4 months to a longer period. And so by calling the IRS and getting 2 holds on collection, you can buy more time from going from stage 1 to stage 2 of the collection cycle. The second stage of the 3 stages of the collection cycle is what's called ACS. ACS stands for the Automated Collection System. It's the second of 3 phases in the collection cycle. These are call centers all over the United States that work cases on the telephone and through the mail. So for instance, if your case is in ACS and you call the IRS today, you might get somebody in Atlanta, Georgia. If you call an hour or 2 later, you may get somebody in Seattle, Washington. Basically, cases are worked first in, first out, so that somebody will work on your case, they will come into work, they will get assigned a bunch of taxpayers to work on their cases, and they will work those cases. They will work it as far as they can, and then that's it. And then, tomorrow, somebody in a different part of the country could pick up where they left off and continue to work the case. Unfortunately, with ACS, you don't get to meet with people face to face, and it's more difficult to deal with cases in ACS than it is with one of the campuses or a local field office, which is phase 3. But there are ways to deal with that, and you have to know what's going on in order to take advantage of those opportunities. But ACS, again, difficult to deal with because you can't meet somebody face to face, and you typically can't mail something to a physical address. If ACS tells you to mail something, it's typically going to a processing center and not to that person's office. So keep in mind, ACS is the most difficult. You're going to get different people, and there's a certain way to deal with them because of the way they're set up as opposed to a local office or a campus. The third and final phase of the collection cycle is a local field office, or what the IRS calls a post of duty. For instance, in Massachusetts, we have at least half a dozen, probably more, field offices around the state. And so once your case goes from notice stage with the campuses to ACS, and if ACS hasn't been able to resolve your problem, it then goes to a field office, and a human being is actually assigned to work your case in your local area. And that person essentially will show up at your house and leave their business card, calling card, saying, "Hi, I'm from the IRS, and call me." Sometimes if you ignore them long enough, they will issue a summons, and they'll leave it at your house. And the summons basically says, you have to show up at our office on this date with this information. And if you don't show up at their office on that date, typically they will give you a second opportunity to show up for a summons hearing. And if you ignore that, what happens is they will refer the case to the U.S. Attorney's Office for enforcement action. And what that means is they will have the U.S. Attorney's Office drag you into federal court before a United States District Court judge to enforce the summons, to force you to provide them the information they need to either assess taxes if you haven't filed, or to resolve the debt and pay it off. So when your case gets to a local field office, it's very serious, and you need to deal with it in a timely fashion, because if you don't, eventually the federal court's going to force you to deal with it. In all my years, I have never had a client who has actually been pursued and detained by the U.S. Marshal's Office. I hear it happens. I have talked to the Boston U.S. Attorney's Office, and they say it does happen, although 95% of the cases that go to district court get resolved before the court date or by the court date. So it's very important that, if you're with a revenue officer, a local field office, you need to deal with things timely. Revenue officers have a lot of power. They can seize assets a lot more quickly, file liens, levy your paycheck, your bank account, show up at your job and talk to your employer, or if you have a business, show up at your business, which often will cause problems with your employees. Your employees will be wondering, what's going on here? Why is the IRS showing up? So when it gets to a field office, you absolutely need to call a practitioner. It's not something to play around with, and any delays on your part is only going to hurt you, and you may very well lose a lot of opportunity to resolve the situation more favorably. But basically, with a field office, call somebody that does this full time. They're going to know what the revenue officer is thinking. They're going to know how the revenue officer operates, what his rules are. Oftentimes, revenue officers, unfortunately, not all, but some will not always tell the truth, and they will use the taxpayer's fear of the IRS. They will use that to intimidate the client, the taxpayer, into revealing, information, and in doing things which, end up with a worse result than if you went to a practitioner. So call a CPA or a tax attorney or a firm that represents taxpayers full-time so that you get the best result possible. Otherwise, if you try to deal with a revenue officer yourself, it's going to end up very badly. Please give us a call to answer any of your questions, and if you'd like to set up a free consultation, you'll get to meet with me or talk with me over the phone, whichever you prefer, and we'll go over your situation, discuss your problem, what options are available to you, and give you some information to think about in making your choice for a tax firm. Call us at the number above.